Okay, so just getting into it a little bit later again this morning. So what are we at? About quarter past 11. Just sort of start off with DXY because it just keeps on sort of grinding on at the moment. So we had a bit more data out last night. So we had ADP data out last night, which had its last month's number revised to 106,000. So it was always expecting a bit of a push up, but the expectation was 131,000, but it actually came in at 103. So again, this is not particularly well, it's not strong data for USD growth, but if you look at the price action around it, it had the initial sort of, this would be the drop off here. It had the initial sort of textbook reaction, which is bang, drop down, but they just keep defending this line here and obviously sort of just pushed it all the way up through the sort of remaining of the US session. So, I mean, these kind of things, if you sort of take it in turn with the data that came out the other night, the ISM, actually, sorry, not the ISM, the JOLTS, the job openings. You're seeing job openings down, you're seeing actual employment down. These aren't strong factors for like sort of putting a lot of confidence into the USD. And in fact, if you actually have a look on, well, local time, sort of Wednesday morning, I don't typically look at these lower sort of levels of US data and that, and at odd time, 2:09 a.m. that it came out, the RCM slash TIPP economic optimism. Basically just sort of like an indicator of a bunch of different companies about obviously their sort of economic outlook, sort of, over the next 6 months or so. 44 previously expected to tip up to 45, came in at 40. So, these sort of things, when you group them together, they kind of sort of show that, look, less companies are advertising, less companies are employing, and the optimism is bad. So, you know what I mean? It's, well, yeah, the economic outlook and that sort of on the street level, like with those companies, isn't particularly good. So, it's a bit odd that you sort of get this sort of drive higher in USD, and this could just sort of be a sort of point of, okay, let's just snap people out, because obviously everybody at the moment is very much been in sell USD mode, and it just continues to grind higher. We've actually seen an interesting sort of lot of price action because typically I've said in the past that USD likes to like 90% of the time follow its sort of early morning gap. But if we have a look here, there's a gap down and a moved up. There's a tiny little gap, but moved up, gap down, moved up, gap down, moved up. So certainly, I mean, the fact that it's gapping down is sort of showing that sort of like, there are segments of the market that obviously still want to sell it. But for whatever reason, it just keeps grinding higher and higher and higher. So, yeah, look, I'm still in the camp of I think that this is just a push up before we get a smack back down. And I think that's going to come from NFP on Friday evening. But yeah, for the time being, it just keeps popping through these levels, and we're really testing the sort of this sort of like consolidation zone from a couple of weeks back, was a sort of like mid-November, so 3 weeks ago. So, and the fact that it's come through this sort of somewhat falling channel with a little back test as well, you got to respect that. But in the more sort of short term, I do, it shows a little bit better on the 4 hour. I still think that this wedge is probably more prominent than to call this a channel. I would have liked to have seen, if I was looking long for US dollar, this to have sort of pushed up to the top side here, or if this does sort of break this sort of rising resistance, a push up to this top level over here, which we can see previously. This is where the sellers have been, and this is what sort of drove it down in that last kick down there. So that's a sort of bit of a, I guess you'd say, a topside target if it does happen to sort of overshoot this sort of short-term rising sort of resistance. But again, once you can get down, or if it, I say once, but the thing is, if it does break this sort of rising support through here, I think this will sort of coincide nicely with this little short-term platform, basically, if you want to sort of say it like that, a sort of support to sort of come down, retest, and then sort of move back down here. But of course, there's no point jumping in too early. There's trades to be done intraday through these points, but certainly once we sort of break this sort of rising support, that'll be a bit more of a time to sort of maybe hold the positions. And as I said, to get down through something like this, it may take it till NFP, which will be around this point here. So, hold on. Something similar to this is probably what I'd be looking for. I mean, NFP is obviously it's a second tier bit of data. Both can be as impactful as kind of like CPI. Certainly very wild as the data drops, and it's only really just behind the actual rate decision. So yeah, it certainly has the ability to just completely melt down with it all. But on a technical level, I reckon that a little bit of a break, retest, and then sort of further move to the downside. I mean, they could sort of come out with very strong numbers, and we could see a push straight up. ADP and NFP have got somewhat of a correlation, but it does have sort of a couple of times where they kind of sort of almost give polar opposite ideas. So just because we got a weakening number on ADP doesn't guarantee that NFP will follow suit, but we will have to sort of wait and see. The short here and now, still have to sort of wait for this to open. Again, pretty much the same. It's broken. It had a little range that it was working with yesterday. Coming out here, I'd expect probably another little gap down. This probably area to be a bit of a support. And then probably if we do sort of get a pop of yesterday's wick high, or last night's wick high, that would sort of signal probably a little bit more upside to it all. But otherwise, a break back down into this range could sort of see it just sort of bouncing around a little bit. The days have been quite, well, at least Asian session has been quite sort of flat. As you can see, these are just sort of real grind periods, grind periods, grind periods. It's not really a sort of massive trending move. Overall, it's moving in this direction, but certainly through sort of Asia session, which is kind of generally like here, I think more or less probably around here, it's just very much just choppy back and forth sideways. So yeah, there's not really a great deal to be taken from this, particularly coming into NFP. I think things are going to be fairly subdued. Go across to Aussie, because Aussie had that nice break yesterday, and I missed it. The TP by like literally was 1,000th of a cent. So yeah, it was like 1/10 of a point. So coming back up on this second push through here, and like TP was like just here kind of thing. So that's all right. So took some profit in that along the way. We did see the break of the channel, and that was a great trade that came through. And on a technical level, that worked very well. What we're seeing now is just coming back down here. Potentially, at the moment, we got some data out in 4 minutes. We got the trade balance. So this could give us a little shunt. But what we could potentially be seeing along here is, a double bottom. So if it can hold this zone, we know that this is a support area. We've seen it previously. So a double bottom here would make this the breakout level above yesterday's highs. Yeah. And then that would give you a measured move. Back up to sort of like well into the 66 cent moves. Though you've got to sort of think that these moves coming down here, it did attempt to get up. It needs to hold this zone to initiate. Obviously, it will need to break this to sort of really bring this price target into effect. But of course, can't get to here if it doesn't hold this zone. So we'll see how this trade balance sort of works out. See what they do with the US session sort of through, US dollar through the Asian session. Downside, we're probably looking, we've got a little bit of a minor zone here, and then we got at sort of 65.30, and then of course back down to low 65s, which is pretty crazy when you sort of think we're right up against knocking on 67 a couple of days ago. But this is what I say about Aussie as well. If you look at these levels where they've sort of hit up here, bang, rejected down, it's in the 90s. And then we come through yesterday, comes up, it's in the 90s. This is what I say, sort of like the 90s always plays a very sort of crucial role going either way with it all. And, support over here, well, this is a 92. Yes, we got the little wick down, but, the bulk of the support was coming in around this zone. And this is what I say, the 90s seems to be a very reoccurring level with Aussie dollar. every time. So if you're trying to sort of counter trade the trend, that certainly seems to be something worth keeping an eye on. If we drag this across here, this will just sort of be the next sort of, I guess, sort of falling resistance. Obviously, we broke out of here, snapped out anybody that got this trade through here and didn't take profit. We tried to sort of rally for a second time here, and I think this is around that sort of US data news. But obviously, sort of we saw, I'll flip across to copper copped a snap to the downside, a copped a whack to the downside. So, well, we're seeing data's coming out in just 1 minute. We're seeing Aussie sort of perk up a little bit. We're seeing gold perk up a little bit as well. Um, yeah, so we saw that sort of move up here, which it goes in line with DXY sort of selling down. But of course, then we saw US dollar just continue to ramp up to the top side. Copper got hammered, and obviously so Aussie got hammered as well. So potential double bottom here. If we break down below this level, 66.30 and then 65.20. 65.10 to 65.20, this sort of zone here. And again, this sort of goes, we've seen this was a bit of a springboard to sort of make the next leg up on this way over here. We are pretty, this is on the 1 hour, we are pretty heavily oversold. Does look like it wants to sort of tip up and try and attempt to hold this, but we'll see what this data comes out with and sort of see how that impacts it. Just flip across what I've got the news going. So expectation of 7.75 billion. Okay, 7.13 billion. So previously it was 6.79 billion. So it is up on what we had previously, but lower than what expectations is. So, it's a bit of a mixed sort of position with it all. Off the bat, very subdued. I mean, it's not trade balance isn't a massive sort of high tier kind of bit of news, but yeah, it's having a small little reaction. But again, you're also seeing gold move up, and gold's not going to be affected by Aussie data, so it could just be more of a sort of broad market sense that it's moving as 11:30. It was sort of moving into this sort of like pre sort of volume or sort of Asia volume kind of areas at the moment. So yeah, short term, obviously it looks like it's trying to hold this sort of double bottom. We got a little bit of a range through here, 65.70. I think if you can get up above this level here, it'd be fairly good because this is obviously a bit of a horizontal. It would also come in line with a bit of a sort of of this falling resistance. So if we can get above 65.70, I think there's a good test of 6600 again, or 65.90 and change to sort of come to sort of really sort of play out. So somewhere along these lines here, this is based on either reject down here like this, and possibly if we do this, then I might even say that that'd come down a little bit further, but I'd like to see it above. So where are we going here? Break through here, come up here, back test, come up here. And as I said, this will be your major breakout, as I said. So if we get this breakout up here, then that's our price target from a measured move sort of double bottom status. Would be sitting around here at 66.40. You're going to need a little bit to sort of give it that kind of shunt at the moment, but if copper can rally a little bit here, which looks like it's kind of coming off its lows, if we can see US dollar sort of chill out a little bit, then we could see some continued move on Aussie. But the here and now is above 65.70. I think then you can really make a call whether we're going to see a further sort of recovery. I mean, this could then just end up ranging through here as well. But 65.70, if you can't get above 65.70, well, you're not going to be able to attack any of these higher levels. Flip on to gold, because gold, this is quite interesting. Well, it's not quite interesting. It's exactly as we said. If you watched yesterday's video, we said, okay, these are support, resistance, resistance, resistance. This is where we did it yesterday. And I said, look, first of all, I said two things. One, that this looked very trappy, which obviously it did. It had that little negative divergence coming down here, and the negative divergence played out beautifully, hammered up to the top side here. That was great. I got in a few times sort of around 20. And I got out a little bit 30, around sort of 31, 32 kind of thing, and popped up to 36. That's fine. But you can see exactly where the sellers were previously, and this is where we'd marked it out. I mean, obviously there was over here, but as I keep saying, these are sort of price levels, not time levels. So we knew that the sellers were going to be coming in here. We've seen it previously. We've seen people that have been sort of buyers over this side. They're going to be sellers over this side. It's been tapped into one time, so that's fine. That's weakened it a little bit. So what we want to do is see another attack on here. At the moment, you know, we're putting in sort of a higher lows, so it's not too bad. Something along this kind of line here. But really, you want to see 36 taken out, but 41, I think, was, if I move these out of the way, yeah, there we go, that top wick there. So this is the level that you really want to get taken out, because obviously this was the high here, and it was unable to sort of come through these ones. So if we sort of have a look, can we drag this anywhere? Oh, wrong one. So is there anything? Yeah, there's a little bit of a triangle sort of playing out here. But again, a close high 30s, I think will bode quite well for gold. If we can get that close up above the sort of like high 30s, yes, we did sort of get it over here. So you'd want to see it really back into this range here. But say above 41, I think sort of 51 is your next target. Again, it's not as strong because it hasn't been as prominent, but we've seen sellers here. We've seen sellers here. So it stands to reason to sort of think that once we get up into this zone, we will see sellers again. Excuse me. We can update this because it's come down a little bit further now, and sort of see how these fib levels come in. Fibs don't really line up with much of this. The 23 is also up around this zone over here. So again, if you sort of do pump through here, I think 51 is a decent target. And then above that, 62, we can see that this was a little bottom of this range on the way down. So 38 is a fairly sort of decent level to sort of say. So price target 1, 51, price target 2, 62. And this is on a break of 41. So there's some good sort of more sort of short-term intermediate kind of levels that we can sort of be targeting. But certainly, as we saw yesterday, flew up and then absolutely smacked on the nose, and then just sort of super choppy around here. We are putting in high lows. Obviously, there's a bit of this triangle sort of happening here. But yeah, a close up around sort of high 30s and a break of 41. And I think these are the price levels that we can sort of look for. So I'll just mark these out a bit. They're your two price targets for the sort of more intermediate sort of thing. Honestly, overall, I do think we're probably going to be sort of coming back up over here. It may take a little bit of time, but major sort of, not major, but where I think will be a very big one will be this one up here, which will be the completion of these bodies. And if you put them on a 4 hour, I think they like, no, oh geez, wow, the 4 hour go. Geez, what a wick. Jeez, man, I would hate to have been buying through this area here. But the 1 hour sort of completions over this level here, I think this would be very much a sort of a magnet for where we could be going. We got price target. Let's see that one. There we go. Make it as small as we can. But yeah, particularly in the here and now, obviously it's not going to go, and it's not going to. We're not going to probably, most likely, not going to see a move like this. It's going to be similar to this kind of price action of chop, 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 chop. But I do think that we're going to get back, forth, back and forth, and move back up to this one over here, which is 21.17 on the conservative side of that sort of price target. Yeah, the here and now, above 41, 52, and then 60, 63 for these little sort of more short-term price targets. Cool, and flip across copper. Watch how it's taken an absolute beating. So you got to start to think what the hell is going on with this. I mean, yeah, it clipped into our price target up over here, and it just has not looked back since. It's absolutely been hammered. I really thought this was the call yesterday. I'm like, time for a bounce. It bounced, yes, and then bang, smashed down even further. So pull this one out for the moment. So you got to start to be a little bit cautious when things are coming down this hard. I really thought we'd get a bit more of a bounce up until this sort of like 385 zone, but we're right off the highs here now. So realistically, this is becoming a sleeper. I reckon that's a nice little matched up sort of falling resistance here. This might almost give us a bit of a channel actually, now that I look at it. Yeah, we could almost sort of call this a little bit of a channel coming through here. I am still sort of looking, obviously, sort of down with the US dollar and sort of up with copper, up with Aussie, up with gold. So I'm trying to be as objective as possible, but I would be happy to sort of call this a little bit of a channel coming through here. We're seeing a little bit of a sort of support and a push off early in Asia. So short term would be to sort of target coming up to sort of 378 or so, and then sort of possibly see if we can sort of push through here. If not, you could see a rejection and then a continuation down here. I mean, a lot of this stuff is sort of predicated on what's going to happen with NFP and US dollar. And at the moment, we're sort of seeing, despite even bad or weak US data, we're still seeing it push up. So is that just sort of really squeezing people, getting people into a position, grabbing liquidity? It very much could so be. If that does happen, then we do see weak NFP data and we see a sell off with the US dollar, then this will give us a break of this and get us back up towards these levels. But the here and now is to sort of see how this channel plays out and sort of see if it can break through this falling resistance here. So I'll put a little alert on this one. Short-term falling resistance, bang. Yeah, it's oversold at the moment. It's tipping back up. Yeah, I can see it's at a little bit of a push. I don't think we're about to melt back down and do another leg lower. I think I reckon we'll get a little bit of a rally, sort of through Asia at least, minimum. Cool, and across to China. China really sort of hammering along the top of this range here. Yeah, it's the same thing with China. It's not a big, I mean, obviously when it moves, bang, came down. That was a great sort of trade through the middle here. But at the moment, it's coming into areas we've seen this sort of level repeat down here. We've seen it more recently here, and we're seeing it again happen here. So, you know, this also goes in line with potentially a little bit of US weakness. We've got a little bit of a sort of rising support coming through here. A break of this level, and then obviously maybe a little bit of a takeout of this sort of minor zone through here will, for me, sort of signal that we're sort of going back down to test these sort of major supports. And these are the weekly supports, remember. Once these ones break, we're going to see hell cut loose, I reckon. I reckon this is going to be a big sort of push and a big another leg down for the yuan, or US dollar yuan, whatever. But I think this is definitely going to see another push down. We're starting to see, certainly on this last push up here, I'll just put this alert in. So this is short term breaking lower. Also starting to see a little bit of, get these out of the way a bit, a negative divergence with this, whereas we've seen, obviously, price has come up to the same level here. Let's make these ones arrow just to emphasize it a bit more. Seeing prices are going from one high to the next high, but at the same time, you've only seen this happen. So it's not a true sort of negative divergence in the sense of it's actually moving higher while the selling's coming down, but it's still pushed up on that second push. It doesn't have the buying to back it. This is another thing that makes you think, okay, yep, a little bit of a push down short term here. So I wouldn't be surprised if again we sort of see a bit of a push down here. And it kind of goes in line with the other things as well. You can see Aussie making a little bit of an effort off the lows, copper making an effort off the lows, gold's pushing up a little bit at the moment. And you know, I could probably see this one sort of selling down here as well in the short term. So you know, 716 just for a little short term move. Underneath that, I reckon we're going back down to test these main supports. It's 713 and change. You know, it's a little bit of an area sort of through here. All right, that's about it from me.